Hi, I'm Wayne Vaughn, CEO of Tyrion. I'm here with Russ Michell. Russ has created an integration between Chainpoint and SilverStripe, an open source content management system. So thanks, Russ, for taking some time to chat today. Can you start by introducing yourself and tell everybody a little bit about SilverStripe?
Certainly. So my name is Russ Michell. I'm originally from the UK and I moved to New Zealand 14 years ago. And I work with 100% open source software. I am a web developer / software developer. I will write stuff in pretty much anything you give me, or I'll try to anyway. And I've been working with the SilverStripe web application framework and content management system ecosystem for around 7 years now. And I used to actually work for SilverStripe Limited, who are the owners and maintainers of that system, or the core maintainers of that system. And I built an interesting system using the Chainpoint network, owned by Tyrion, of course. And that is to prove that a certain version of a page content or a core data object, which is a core class, or an object within SilverStripe, has not changed since it was published, and be able to, of course, verify that independently of your own accord. That's a third-party module. It's an open source module. It's on GitHub. It's currently pre-alpha, and the one feature that I'm working on right now, once merged, will make that a 1.0 ready for others to use.
Very cool. So can we back up a little bit and talk about SilverStripe as a content management system allows web developers and other people to publish content to a website. And who's the kind of customer, who's the kind of end user that needs to be able to prove the integrity and timestamp of the content that's published to a website or a blog?
So there are two questions there. The first is quickly answered by, if you think of Drupal or WordPress, lesser WordPress, SilverStripe is firmly in the Drupal sort of space, and is aimed at developers being able to heavily customize something bespoke for a customer without needing to hack anything. You can do it all using the API provided to you by the core system. SilverStripe is an application development framework. It is coincidentally also known for a content management system, because that's what it was initially in the few years of its development. The CMS is now an add-on module. You can install it into the application development framework, and you have built-in user systems, you have version content, you have all sorts of other features and bells and whistles. The second part of your question with regard to who might use this thing, I could probably back up myself on this one and preface this with, it's pre-alpha software. I built this to learn more about permissionless and semi-permissioned blockchain networks. My primary interest is in permissionless systems such as Bitcoin, Ethereum, and others. And getting my head around things like Merkle trees, Patricia trees, these sorts of systems, and building things are the only way that I learn. I sucked at school. Unless you give me a context around how something should work or why it should work as it has been explained to you, I will not learn verbatim. So I have to get my hands dirty, and in this instance, I will write some code. And that's how I'm learning about how these things are working, and in this case, around in the Tyrion and the Chainpoint context.
Mm-hmm. All right, so you built this as a way for you to learn the technology.
Correct.
Yeah, can you walk into a little bit of detail about what this Chainpoint module for SilverStripe does?
So initially, the easiest way to develop anything for SilverStripe is to do it in a page context. So once you install the content management system module for the framework, you have the ability to create page content, edit page content, version it just like you should expect to in any system. What this system does is allow you to publish something, and then maybe 2 months down the track or a year down the track, go back to a specific version and go, hey, has someone hacked this? Has it been altered? We're not talking tamper-proof. There is no such thing, but there is tamper evidence, as you know, and this provides tamper evidence that something has or has not changed since it was done. The biggest challenge, if I may just add this additional detail, it has been around, sure, I'm now a user of the system, and I can see that someone's written a bunch of code, me in this case, to present this as a user interface. How do they know the code that I've written as it is now essentially an intermediary between the Tyrion network and therefore the Bitcoin network? How do they know that which I have written hasn't also been tampered with or been coerced to produce a certain response or a certain user interface element at a given time? So what I'm working on now to get this 1.0 out is to somehow display a part Merkle tree, or even just a unidirectional tree that can show visually how that initial hash goes through the steps of other people's hashes, basically, to arrive at the op return value and arrive at the Merkle root, which is ultimately stored on the Bitcoin network. If someone can be shown with reasonable level of non-technical understanding that one A leads to B via C, F, X, and wherever else, then I've done my job. But it's, as you know, it's an extremely hard thing to do when you're dealing with hashes, basically.
Yeah, people don't like long strings of funny-looking characters. It doesn't really make any sense to humans. You'll be happy to know that I just finished up the final artwork for designing a new Chainpoint web client, which will give people a visual interface and a drag-and-drop interface for verifying Chainpoint proofs. So that's something you might be able to add into your application or into some sort of like verification web page, which would allow them to more easily verify.
That'll be a really, really cool addition. Again, yeah, depending on what the interface does and what the data that it presents and the manipulation of that data that it presents, we may still end up in a position where, and I suggest we will always be in a position where there is some magic that you just kind of have to get over and go, look, this is complicated stuff. We need to abstract some of this away from you, lest you just burn your brain out looking at this stuff.
That's a common problem, though. I mean, if you think about like DocuSign or Adobe Sign, nobody really knows how the digital signature in the elliptic curve algorithms and things like that work for producing those signatures. Nobody really knows how SSL works, for example, when they go to Amazon and they buy something. But the technology is there, and it's a fundamental part of the experience and the infrastructure behind all these important things in our lives. And ultimately, I think that being able to anchor data to an independently verifiable blockchain network like Bitcoin is going to become just a fundamental part of the internet, and is a fundamental component of how people think about proof and verification of information over time.
I absolutely agree, and I look forward to a time when things are abstracted away to that extent. However, the context in which we are both working is that of a decentralized and open economy, a technology economy, and that kind of moves us away from just relying on people like Adobe and relying on DocuSign to do these things for us, and we forget about it. The ability for someone just to have a look, if they wanted to, under the hood to see how something works is pretty much what I'm getting at here. I may end up giving up, I don't know, but I tend not to. I tend to kind of churn on until I give myself some large headache. But this domain that we're working in is a decentralized domain, and there's decentralized on purpose. The whole idea is to get ourselves away from believing and entrusting things with third parties whom we don't know them, and we don't have no knowledge about how they produce whatever it is that we have otherwise trusted. And it's therefore, the old adage of don't trust but verify, and that's precisely what we're trying to do here.
Yeah, I think one of the coolest things about Chainpoint is that once you've created a Chainpoint proof, that proof is valid forever, whether or not you or whatever server or whatever computer issued it is in existence. So if you think about something like DocuSign, you're pretty much forever dependent on DocuSign to be around for the validity of those documents and those workflows to be able to be valid. But with Chainpoint, you have something that's independent, that you can't tamper with. You can't go back and re-sign the data. You can never recapture that moment in time. So that's sort of the power of things.
Yeah, and again, I agree. And I have to sort of back up and go, from yours and mine and any other sort of technical person's perspective, that's absolutely true. Now we're embedding this, or I say I am embedding this in something that is used by people who are only semi-technical. Sometimes they're not technical. And the real challenge is to go to those guys who know nothing of Bitcoin and should know nothing of Bitcoin. After all, they know nothing of SSL or HTTP or TCP/IP. Showing them that, hey, they've got a piece of content, it's been hashed. They might just get their heads around that. Okay, now how do I prove that there is a link between that hash and the Merkle root? I mean, I realize I'm probably pushing the proverbial uphill here, but I want to make an attempt at making this as easy as possible for the user. And I've been doing software development for 20 years. However, that doesn't stop me asking what might be essentially cretinous questions about how does something work? How does it do this? And if it doesn't satisfy me, it damn well isn't going to satisfy someone less technical than me. Hence, I'm on this kind of this journey to get this as user-friendly as possible.
Well, that's great. I can't wait to see what you end up producing. We're taking a parallel journey and giving guys like yourself tools that you can use, and hopefully some of the feedback that we get from you and other developers who work with Chainpoint will help us make things that are better. So, speaking of software developers, can you describe a little bit about your experience on working with Chainpoint?
Yeah, so I don't have very much experience with regard to running a node or the incentive mechanism for having to pre-store yourself with 5,000 TNT and all that kind of stuff. Perhaps I should, and I'd learn more firsthand in that manner. What I'm doing is more sticking to the Chainpoint concept itself and orientating everything around the Chainpoint receipt. That is a very important document. And the way that is structured, I have some suggestions about how you might change that, but I realize there might be technical reasons why it's structured in the way that it is. That is what everything is centered around. That is what I'm trying to produce visualizations from. And that is ultimately the core of information that a user might want to derive what it is they're seeking from.
Mm-hmm. So did you find it relatively easy to pick things up and start working with them?
Absolutely. Look, if it involves a public API, that's no problem. I love consuming third-party data and dealing with these kinds of integration issues that you may get. The Swagger Hub API is useful to have. And the thing that threw me to start off with, because I'm not familiar with it, is usually when, as you all know, when you're consuming a public web-based API, you go through some kind of gateway, and that's handled on their side by, I know, a bunch of load balancers and some other machines behind there. Obviously, it's a decentralized network, so what I'm doing is connecting to an individual node that each of them exposes through the Chainpoint software its own API. And going through the motions, I was kind of it dawned on me later, but it was kind of obvious. It wasn't obvious at the start that I needed to cache in my application initially the IP address of the node that I randomly sought from the three A, B, and C resources, and then recall those to fetch the intermediate proofs and the intermediary documents, such that I can then make my call an hour later or so for the final proof. That took me a little bit of head scratching to go, why the hell can't I get this? With hindsight and referring back to the core docs, I got my head around it.
All right, excellent, cool. How long did it take you from sort of start to finish to work on this project and get that first module built?
To be honest, I don't have very much time, as you might imagine, as a CEO of a company you are. I mean, I'm essentially a grunt in my company, but I do some interesting stuff with some interesting people. But
we're all grunts in our own way.
Yeah, absolutely. But I don't have very much time, so I have like an hour on the train between my home work there and back, and a couple of hours in the evening, two or three times a week. So in terms of contiguous time, it took me a month or so to get a piece of software together that went end to end. Had I had 3 days to hack this with 9-10 hours a day, I probably would have done it in 3 days. The documentation was enough. It perhaps was a bit sort of spread out and disparate, but there was enough there in the 3 locations once I discovered it to do what I needed to do with it.
Yeah, that's a good feedback. One of the things that we are going to be working on is just trying to clean up some of that documentation and make it easier for everybody to access it. Sure. Do you have any ideas or plans for future Chainpoint projects?
At the moment, this is an interesting module for me because, yes, it makes me learn, but I've since talked to a colleague of mine who's actually, since I started joining my company, he's now in my team, who's building a crypto pay system built on SilverStripe. And he would very much like to use the electronic receipt as proof of verification, a verification of purchase, proof, and other transactions that his system will be doing. And because my module will fit seamlessly into what he's doing, he's quite excited to be one of the first users of this thing.
That's pretty cool. So you build like a building block that other people can basically use for other purposes. All right, awesome. Well, Russ, thanks for taking some time to chit chat today about this. How can people find you online?
Everything with the Russ in it. TheRuss.com, all one word, is my Twitter handle. You can pretty much dig me out on the same on GitHub, also PHPTEK on GitHub, and LinkedIn, TheRuss.com on LinkedIn.
Perfect. All right. Thanks again, Russ. Really appreciate it.
No problem, Wayne. Thanks very much.